Summer of the Mariposas, Chapter 11. El Alacran, the scorpion. Those who get stung by a scorpion end up on the floor. As Teresita explained how to get to Hacienda Dorada, her husband drew up a sketchy map of the terrain for us on an old piece of linen, a shortcut, explaining it as he went along. I've circled the areas I know to be dark. You need to avoid those bad places. Now this square is an old abandoned barn. You can rest there. Get out of the sun if you must. You'll have to travel about 12 or 13 miles up and down those hills today, but you can get there this evening if you stay away from those monsters, Teresita's husband said. They gave us a sack with provisions, a dozen hard-boiled eggs, a hunk of goat cheese still in its thin cloth casing, a stack of flour tortillas, and water. Most importantly, Teresita gave us a short piece of silver silk thread. As we trotted away, the old couple waved to us from their door and watched anxiously as we took the worn path down the hill. We walked along the dirt path for miles in the heat of the morning, resting often and drinking from the 3 huge gourds of well water Teresita's husband had given us. Delia, and Juanita argued often, especially over the amount of water any one person should drink. Sometimes they got so nasty with each other, I threatened to blister someone's behind with my chancla if they said one more mean word to each other. By late afternoon, I had them walking in pairs, a good 10 feet apart from each other. Peta did nothing but complain, even when we sat in the shade, so I paired her with Juanita, since she couldn't seem to get along with anyone else. By the afternoon, we realized we needed to get out of the sun for a while, so we started talking about looking for a shady place to rest. It was while we were looking for a safe place to settle down that we saw it. A lame donkey, harnessed to a dilapidated old wagon, was making its way down the road towards us. "Eeyore!" Peta screamed and started to walk toward the cart. "That's not Eeyore," Juanita said, pulling Peta back by her sleeve. "Well, I didn't mean the real Eeyore," Peta explained. "Just one like him. Look, he even has a ribbon on his tail." "That's not a ribbon," Juanita corrected. "It's a dirty rag." Peta ran up to meet the donkey, who had come to a complete stop before us. "Whatever, I don't care what you think." The donkey hung its head, looking pathetic. As I got closer to the cart and inspected the poor animal, I had to admit it did look a bit Eeyore-ish. It had big, sad eyes, and his lips turned down at the corners, like it was a little depressed. "Don't touch it," I said, slapping Peta's hand away as she came up to pet the beast. "He says he's tired." Peta stroked his neck and face, and thirsty, and covered in fleas, Juanita interjected. "You're going to get piojos if you keep petting him." I moved to examine the animal's head. Peta was making kissy faces at the donkey and cooing at him. I said not to touch it. I tried to pull Peta away from the beast, but she shook me off. Delia came up and joined Peta in petting the donkey. "You two are weird. You'll touch a dead man, but you won't touch a living, breathing animal? Something's definitely wrong with you." "I'll touch it if it's not all dirty and gross," Juanita said. "All right, that's enough," I said, pushing them all out of the way. The donkey's foreleg looked swollen at the ankle, so I crouched in to inspect it. "Is it hurt?" Juanita wanted to know. "I don't know," I said. "I can't tell what's wrong, but it was limping. I wonder who it belongs to." Peta shushed everyone and cocked her ear at the donkey, who was braying loudly. "Listen to him. He says he's all right. He's just tired and we should give him a little time to rest." "You're nuts. You know that, right?" Juanita told Peta, who ignored her and turned her attention back to the donkey. "Leave her alone," I said absently. I looked down the road, trying to figure out where the animal had come from. Maybe we had missed a ranchito somewhere along the way. It might be worth our while to backtrack a little and investigate. But because we were running low on water. "Well, she is," Juanita complained. "She's having a conversation with a donkey, for God's sakes." "She is not," I insisted. "She's just pretending." Peta put her ear up to the animal's mouth like she was listening to him speak. Juanita grabbed our little sister's arm and pulled her away. "Peta, don't do that. It could be sick, mamita." I scrambled onto a boulder and looked out at the horizon as far as I could see. With my hand shading my eyes, I surveyed the circumference of the area looking for a dwelling, a farm, or a ranch house where the donkey might belong. But there was nothing out there but brush and husache trees. As far as I could tell, he'd come out of nowhere. I couldn't help but wonder what happened to his owner. His name is Trito, Peta said, interrupting the beast's thunderous brays. He says he'll take us to Abuelita's house. He knows the way. We should just wait a little while he catches his breath. Peta's words, her conviction that the donkey could speak and she could understand him, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up to alert. La Llorona's warnings, Teresita's reading, they all came back to me. So let me get this straight, Juanita asked Peta as my mind raced through the warning signs, trying to remember the things I should be looking for. This is a talking donkey, and it wants to give us a ride. Is that it? I'm all in. Velia jumped on the rickety wagon and looked around for a way to navigate the newfound vehicle. Odelia, do you know how to drive this thing? Where's the steering wheel? My mind back on the present, I hurried to the front of the wagon. There is no steering wheel, and you should really get down from there. I reached up to help her get off the wagon, but Velia ignored me. He says you don't have to use the reins. He knows where we're going, Peta said, pressing her cheek against the animal's cheek and smoothing down the tuft of hair at his forehead. Sure, whatever. Juanita looked at me and circled her index finger around her ear to show me that what she thought of Peta's interpretations. Juanita paused and scrutinized the wagon. It was big enough to hold us all, and though it was old, it seemed sturdy enough to take us all the way to Abuelita's house. Listen, this might not be a real talking donkey, but using this wagon to get to Abuelita Remedio's house is not a bad idea. Okay, everybody, up. Juanita suited her own words and climbed up herself. No, 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 I said, taking the reins in my hands. Juanita reached for them, but I stepped out of her reach on the driver's seat. The other girls stood half ready to climb up, but scuffed their feet in indecision at my vehemence. We didn't agree on this. The animal should have an owner nearby. I mean, where's the driver here? Farm animals aren't tethered to wagons 24/7. It's obvious something happened to its owner. He probably fell, or worse yet, the donkey might have gone psycho and run off without him. At that moment, something struck my core, and Teresita's words came back to me. Slowly, quietly, they echoed in my mind. A devious warlock. He will come in disguise, asking for help. Girls, listen to me, I pleaded, holding on to the reins and standing my ground. Remember what Teresita said. What if this is him, the Nagual? Odelia, Juanita interrupted. You didn't really believe everything that old lady said, did you? I leaned in toward Juanita, losing my patience. Look, I'm not making this up. I really did speak with La Llorona at the river, and she said it too. This world is different. Here, things are not always what they appear to be. I have a bad feeling about this, Juanita. Something about this creature just gives me the creeps. Let's leave him here and get back on the way to the Hacienda Dorado. I agree, Juanita said, looking down at me from her seat in the front of the wagon. We should get back on the road to Abuelita's house, and this is the fastest and safest way to get there. So stop being so mullish and get up here. Come on, everybody, up. Delia, who had been wandering off toward the back end of the wagon, looked at me remorsefully for a moment and then climbed up next to Velia. Peta, being so attached to the donkey, was too busy petting it to climb up. So Juanita whistled at her and said, You too, Christopher Robin, up on the wagon. As I watched Peta climb onto the driver's seat, Juanita reached down and yanked the reins out of my hands. As soon as they were all aboard, the animal started walking, pulling the wagon up the road in the same direction we had been heading. I can't believe this, I shouted, trying to keep up with the wagon. If Mama were here, she'd be dueling out the spankings by now. I just hope we don't end up paying for this in a major way. I walked beside the wagon briskly, always keeping an eye on the donkey, looking for a sign that he was not what he appeared to be. I could only hope I was wrong about this. Even with as loony as Peta was acting, she kept conversing with the beast as we made our way down the road. But at least we were traveling in the right direction. After a while, the girls celebrated their good fortune by breaking into the provisions. Juanita passed out the hard-boiled eggs, cheese, and tortillas. I was still mad at them, so I refused to partake, but they fed like kings, throwing eggshells up the side of the wagon like they were gold coins meant for peasants. After the feast, the girls seemed to settle down. They sat back and enjoyed the rhythmic ride, mesmerized into a weary silence by the fullness of their stomachs and the steady movements of the wobbly cart. I trailed behind them at a slow but steady pace. We traveled for about an hour before I stopped to catch my breath. The sun was beating down furiously on us, and I was ready to pass out from heat exhaustion. Juanita looked back to talk to me. You sure you don't want to get up here? I'm sure, I said. I just hope we reach Hacienda Dorada before nightfall. Oh, we will, Juanita said, turning back to look at the road ahead of us. It's so peaceful here. This is what life is all about. No cell phones, no iPods, no cars driving by polluting our lungs. I know. This is how our ancestors must have felt, I said as I sped up to walk beside the wagon. The sun continued making its way westward in the sky and was almost directly above us now. Unhurried, relaxed, and grateful for what they had. Sure, no running water, Velia interjected. No indoor plumbing, Delia continued sarcastically. No deodorant. As if to accentuate their cackles, the donkey let out 2 lungfuls of vociferous braying. He wants to know if we want to drink some water and rest, Peta said. There's a running creek up on the left. Do we want to stop? She leaned over and almost tipped out of the wagon. Be careful, Peta. I pushed her back onto the safety of the cart with all my might. You hurt me, she complained, rubbing her arm where it had been scraped on the side of the wagon. We're already in all kinds of hot water, I said, refusing to apologize. I don't want to have to explain to Mama how I lost one of her daughters. The business with Peta took all of my attention, but I did notice that the donkey had pulled the cart off the trail and stopped. I was grateful for it until he took off again, speeding up ahead of me, bearing left, crossing a field full of daisies and heading up a hill at a trot too fast for me to keep up. Whoa! Juanita called out, pulling on the reins. In her distraction, Juanita had obviously given him too much rein. He must have been instinctively just going off in search of something. Good to eat, right? However, my fear that this was the nagual Teresita warned us about kept me on the edge. I ran as fast as my legs would take me, keeping an eye on them as I went and hoped the donkey wouldn't take them too far astray. I just worried that my legs wouldn't take me very far after all the walking we'd done today and yesterday after the car broke down. And all the while as I ran, I tried to remember the song Teresita said we must sing if we came upon the warlock, the song of the birds and the rain, but my mind was blank. I had no idea what the song might sound like. Not even a single lyric came to me as I dashed after the girls in the cart. Whoa! Whoa! Juanita kept calling, but no matter how loud she called, the beast just kept cantering along, ignoring her. They pulled so far ahead, I'd worried they'd disappear over the next hill, and I'd never see them again. I considered the ear pendant, but there was nothing to use it on, and Teresita had said to save it for our most dire circumstances. I would have to use my wits. I kept running, but even as I ran, I couldn't help but notice the beast was running awfully fast for a lame donkey. Finally, after about 5 minutes, he slowed from a canter to a steady trot. Slower, but not slow enough for me to catch up. It was also fast enough that none of the girls could jump off the wagon safely. Even though they weren't saying much, their faces reflected the horrifying recognition that even if this wasn't the nagual, they might be in great danger. When the donkey did finally stop, it was so abruptly that my hermanitas lurched forward and caught themselves against the rails in order not to fall off. Holy guacamole, that was a close one, Velia said, jumping off the back of the wagon and walking around as if her legs were going to give out from under her. My legs felt like soggy fideo noodles, too, from all the walking and running. After running almost a quarter of a mile, I caught up to the wagon and stood with my hands on my waist, trying to catch my breath. I needed that breath so I could give the girls a piece of my mind. Where are we? Juanita asked as she helped Peta off the edge of the old cart. We looked around and saw the creature had brought us to the mouth of a small cave on the side of the hill. What is this? I don't know, but it looks scary, Delia said from her seat in the wagon. We should keep going. This place gives me the creeps. Don't go in there, I started, winded to the point of stuttering. Stay away from it. We don't know what's in there. Where had I put the map that Teresita's husband had given us, warning us of places to avoid? I had a creepy feeling about this place if it was on the map. I searched through my pockets and found it, but before I could gather my thoughts, Peter interrupted us. Don't be silly, she said. Chorito says it's a good cave and we should rest here. Night's coming. I looked up at the sky and realized that she was right. The sky was darkening, but the girls had been so content just letting the donkey pull them up the dirt path, and I'd been so distracted by having to keep up with him that we hadn't even noticed dusk was upon us. A dark, foreboding feeling took hold of me then. I had failed to convince my sisters to stay away from the creature, and now we were being invited into this cave? I could feel it. Something terrible was about to happen. If only I could remember the song of the cave, but it was useless. I had no idea what it was. Don't be ridiculous, Velia said. I'm not sleeping in a cave. There's probably vampire bats in there. Velia's right, I said. We should get back to the dirt path and try to find the next mark on this map. Teresita's husband said the path led to an old abandoned barn. We could rest there. Listen to the child, a deep male voice said, and we all turned around to look at the animal, who turned around to look at us. I couldn't help but notice the bit was no longer in his mouth, and he was not hooked up to the wagon anymore. Donkeys shouldn't talk, Velia whispered, stepping away from the beast. The barn's no good. The roof leaks, and it's out too far. The creature's lips were moving, and the words were coming out of his mouth as he moved towards us. I pushed Peta behind me and shoved Juanita out of the warlock's way. It's the Nagual! Velia, Delia, get our things, I said, slowly stepping away from the donkey. Listen, whatever or whoever you are, we don't want any problems. Alames, todavía nada más, ven aquí, ven acá. The donkey's words stirred up something fierce and feral in me, and I grabbed the nearest stick I could find on the ground. It wasn't big enough, but I could weld it like a sword to the eye if I had to. Let's go. Move it, I told the girls as they cowered behind me. Let me go, Peta squealed as she squirmed inside Velia's locked arms. You're being stupid. He wants to help us. I know he does. He told me so. Peta, I said, pulling her into my arms, you have to stop being so childish. He isn't a storybook character. He's an evil man, a sorcerer, not a donkey, and he's trying to trick us. We have to get away from him before he hurts us. Aramas, todavía, nada más, ven aquí, ven acá. Erre frío, erre mío, aramas. The Nagual continued, even as his eyes rolled into the back of his head, and his long ears perked and flapped loudly. Suddenly the last 2 rays of sun disappeared from the horizon, and darkness descended upon us like the shadow of malevolence. The night air grew thick and sulphuric around us. Our breathing became shallow, and I felt sick and lightheaded. We have to get out of... I didn't finish my thought. My tongue was twice its normal size, and I couldn't make out the words. Alames, todavía nada más, ven aquí, ven acá. Arre frío, arre mío, has las mías 5 hermanitas, 5 estrelitas, serán mías, alamas. The Nagual kept chanting different verses of the same spell, and before we knew it, we were all on the ground, weakly looking at the donkey as we shifted from animal back to his human form and stood, a dark-clad figure looming tall and menacing above us. Regret was the last thing we saw in each other's eyes before we all passed out.